subject financial accounting for commerce and management students. In this session, we will discuss the fundamentals of final accounts, their components, importance and applications, and which helps in financial decision making. The discussion will also address common challenges faced by students and professionals in preparing and analyzing financial accounts. Additionally, we will also explore how technology has transformed accounting practices and how a strong grasp on final accounts benefits students in their careers beyond accounting. Today, we have with us esteemed resource persons who will explore us with the importance, challenges and applications of financial account. Let them introduce. Professor A. Patrick, Professor and Chairman, Board of Studies, Department of Commerce, Osmania University. And with me, Dr. Nazia Sultana, Associate Professor, University College for Women, Koti, Hyderabad. Both experts have rich experience over 20 years in higher education and they are experts in financial accounting and commerce. The first 45 minutes will be in-depth discussion led by our esteemed resource persons covering key aspects of final accounts. Zero 4023680 I repeat 04023680456. Kindly ensure your questions are relevant to today's topic only. Before we start, let me introduce a brief introduction of today's topic. Final accounts. Final accounts refers to the financial statements prepared at the end of an accounting period to determine the financial position and profitability of a business. They typically include the trading account, profit and loss account, and balance sheet. These statement provides valuable insights for business owners, investors, and other stakeholders to make financial decisions. For commerce and management students, understanding these finance accounts as it helps from them to develop analytical skills, apply theoretical knowledge to a real world financial scenario, and prepare for careers in accounting, finance and business management. Final accounts forms the foundation of financial reporting and decision making in any organization. Let us begin our discussion by understanding the fundamentals of final accounts. Now, my question is to Professor Patrick. Sir, to start with the basics first, what are final accounts and why are they fundamental part of accounting?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good afternoon to all the viewers once again. Happy to be a part of this teleconferencing program. Nice to know that you all are pursuing this program on accountancy. Now, when you look at the AICPA definition of what accounting, it says it's to do with the art and science of identifying, recording, classifying, summarizing, and interpreting thereof in terms of money and money's worth. That's what we say is accounting. So the thing is, we go about with identifying that a transaction has happened with various documents like bills, vouchers, and other things, and we make an entry into the journal, which is the day book. Then we go about by transferring it into specific books which are called as the T accounts or the ledgers, and the process of transferring it, we call it as posting. All the ledger book balances are pooled together and summarized at one place, which we call it as the trial balance, and the end stage is based on the trial balance we go about with preparing the final accounts. And final accounts, as you have rightly said, it could be trading account or manufacturing, and then there is P&L and balance sheet. Now, there is a difference that we look for the organizations which are pursuing commercial goals and the organizations which are non-profit. In non-profit, we don't use the word profit. Instead, we say surplus and deficit. And there we prepare what is called as the income and expenditure account there, and balance sheet is common in both the cases there. And trading account, we go about with preparing, which gives a figure which is based on the direct expenses and direct revenues, and we call for the gross profit or gross loss. And P&L account, we include all the indirect expenses that are there and figure out what is the net profit or net loss. And at a given point of time, we want to figure out where the organization is heading in terms of profitability, liquidity, and solvency. So these things are told by the income statements that are there. And you want to figure out where does an organization stand in terms of its assets and liabilities at a given point of time. It's a kind of a snapshot.
Yes.
So if somebody takes a picture of mine, how do I look now? The same way, when you take a picture of a business at a given point of time, you try to figure out where does the assets and liabilities stand, and that statement we call it as the balance sheet.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting the significance of final accounts. As we can see that this statement serves a crucial tool in evaluating financial performance and ensures business houses accountability and transparency. Now my question is to Dr. Nazia. In your experience, why it is critical for students to understand the concept and application of final accounts early in their academic journey?
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. Greetings of the day to all the learners present here. It's nice that your organization is organizing such kind of teleconferences where you are able to have an interaction with the experts on the subject. Coming to why is it crucial for students to have an understanding of final accounts. Basically, as a student, when you know what is a final account and then you understand when a transaction happens in a company, which we call as an accounting event. Now that particular accounting event will have certain results or outcomes. And those outcomes you need to understand in terms of whether it is having a revenue impact or a capital impact. And then you divide the items based on whether they are revenue expenses, capital expenses, or whether they are items related to revenue incomes or capital incomes. And when you do that, you basically segregate the expenses and the incomes and record them in the respective accounts. This fundamental knowledge will help a student in order to understand what final accounts are, and that grounding will help them to go ahead and understand a little advanced subjects such as financial statement analysis, or be it cost and management accounting, or taxation and advanced tax laws which are there. Apart from that, when the students develop this kind of understanding, they also have an analytical ability to interpret the various transactions which are recorded in the final accounts, because ultimately what is needed of a student when they graduate is we want them to understand how to interpret the financial statement. So when an accounting event has happened and the transaction is recorded, apparently we know whether it is increasing income or decreasing income, and we know whether the assets have gone up or the liabilities have gone up. But what does it mean for the company and what does it mean for all the stakeholders? So a basic understanding of accounting will help them to have these advancements in their knowledge related to interpreting financial statements, as well as having an understanding of the advanced subjects which are there in their curriculum of commerce as such.
Yeah, really this is an insightful perspective, madam. We understood that building a strong foundation in final accounts which equips students with analytical skills are very essential for today's modern business needs and for interpreting and applying financial data in the future careers. Now my questions is for Patrick sir. Could you please elaborate on the key components of final accounts and their individual purposes?
Yeah. Now when you look at final accounts, we say there is trading account, there's profit and loss account, and then there is balance sheet. What we do in a trading account is we are trying to compare the cost of goods sold with the revenues that are generated. If the revenues are more than the cost of goods sold, then we talk about gross profit. If the cost of goods sold are more than the revenue generated, we end up with gross loss. And the cost of goods sold normally includes the opening stock. It is to do with the net purchases and whatever are the direct expenses that are related with the process of purchase, we include. And whatever is the gross profit or the gross loss, we transfer it to the next statement, which is to do with the profit and loss account. And here we go about it comparing all the income sources that are there. Apart from the regular source of sale, you may have sale of some old assets or newspapers or other things there. Apart from the regular course of business, there could be other revenues that could be generated, which is added to the gross profit there, and we compare it with all the other expenses, which could be selling and distribution, office expenses, and other expenses that are there. And if the expenses are greater than the revenues, we end up with net loss. If the revenues are greater than the expenses, we talk about the net profit. This net profit is an appreciation or an increase to the capital which the stakeholders have invested in the business, and we add it to the capital. It depends. Are we doing account for a sole proprietorship or a partnership or a public utility or a public service, railways, airways, electricity board? It varies how we go about with looking at the concept of whether we call it surplus or profit there. And balance sheet, it goes about, as I said earlier too, it gives a snapshot at a given point of time. How does the assets and the liabilities, how do they reflect each other? So when we talk about the balance sheet, we got to recollect what you learned in the principles of accounting about the accounting equation, where we say assets is equal to the capital and liability. Capital is the money that is invested into the business by the owners of the business, and liability is to do with what is the borrowed part of the thing. So whatever we have, if we look at the American system of accounting, they do everything with the accounting equation itself, where we say asset is equal to capital and liability. But when it comes to the British, we were under the colonial rule for pretty long.
Yes.
So there we go about by looking at classifying it into personal, real, nominal. We talk about journalizing and other things there.
Thank you, sir. Understanding these components are very crucial before applying in analytical way. Now, my question is to Madam. Can you please explain the difference between a trading account, manufacturing account, and how they are important in final accounts?
Sure, ma'am. Basically, when we say depending on the nature of the company, depending on what the company does, you would have different types of accounting statements or financial statements that they prepare. If the company is exclusively engaged in the process of production and manufacturing, they basically create a manufacturing account wherein they talk about entries related to stock, raw material, and they also talk about all entries related to direct expenses, where you are able to trace each unit that you are spending with every unit of output that is being produced. So every single rupee that I am spending, maybe if I am paying wages to the laborer, where my output could be, for example, 10,000 units, and if the labor is being paid, say 50 rupees per unit that they produce, then for every unit that the labor is producing, I am directly able to trace that particular rupee that I am spending on wages. So based on traceability, I usually connect all my direct expenses to the manufacturing account. So therefore, items which are related to manufacturing or production, basically related to raw material, direct expenses of wages, and other direct expenses like heating, lighting, which are all incurred in relation to production, and work in progress, that goes into as a part of your manufacturing account. Basically, any account that you prepare would end up showing to you a profit or a loss, be it in terms of gross profit or net profit. But in manufacturing account, we don't end up with a profit or loss because the production is still on. We have not yet gone to the market to sell the product. So there we end up with using something called as work in progress. Yes. And that goes to the trading account, where we complete the production. So finished goods are ready, and then we take it to the market. And then when we are selling, sales which are recorded as a revenue on the credit side of the trading account, and then we accumulate all the cost on the debit side and come to know whether we have made a gross profit or a loss. So in case the company is engaged into manufacturing, then they prepare a manufacturing account. Otherwise, all those other companies which are not engaged into manufacturing but are only selling, then they prepare a trading account. So that's how the result of a trading account would be ending up with giving you figures related to gross profit or a gross loss.
Yeah, a very well explanation. Now it is clear how different types of businesses actually, according to their structure, they need a statement based on their operational needs. Now sir, it's questions to you, sir. Why is the profit and loss account so significant for both internal management and external stakeholders?
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now what happens is, when you learn this various principles of accounting, under the concepts we talk about going concern.
Yes.
We say business goes on continuously and it has got perpetual succession, common seal. Yeah. We're not sure when it will come to an end. But we can't run businesses that way. We have to know where are we heading. We need to know whatever things which are there under control. Is it working well or not? Are we heading towards profit? Are we heading towards losses? Now, stakeholders, when you say, it could be to do with the investors, it could be to do with the employees, it could be to the government, because for the government, the source of revenue is taxes.
Yes.
So based on whatever profits are made, you go about with paying taxes to the government. Employees get a share of bonus, salary if the company is earning good profit. As an investor, I would like to put my sources into a company which is profitable rather than loss making. So, the market value of the share, a lot of other things are dependent on the profitability part. So how efficiently your management is working, it's a question for internal, whether they are doing good kind of a work, whether they're deploying the resources in a proper way or not. So any organization, we say we have got 5 M's, that is men, money, machines, materials and management. There are different ways that we go about it, converting it into either goods or services. It could be job shop, batch, process, assembly line, continuous, mass or project. Ultimately, what we are trying to look for is, are we doing things wherein we shouldn't be in a position wherein we tend to overspend? So the thing is, are we trying to do things wherein we are under a control of things which can be kept under control there? So profit holds a significant thing, and there are different ways that we interpret by doing ratios and other things there.
Yeah, very well, sir. We understood with your explanation that a well-prepared profit and loss account is indeed a powerful tool for decision making for investors and all stakeholders to invest their money into the business. And now, madam, my question, what makes the balance sheet the cornerstone of final accounts, and how should students approach understanding it?
Sure, ma'am. Basically what happens is, as a student, when we start, even when we now that we are teachers, but when we were students, when a problem used to be given to us in a class, our ultimate goal used to be tally the balance sheet.
Yes.
Our assets at the end of the day should equate to the liabilities. That was what we wanted, the balance sheet to tally and score as many marks as possible by tallying it. Now balance sheet, that's how remains as the cornerstone of all the financial statements, because ultimately the aim of every business is to know what is their financial position on a particular day. Maybe I have worked throughout the year, and then I sold goods and I paid wages, I paid salaries, I paid rent, electricity, etc. And then when I earned the revenue, there's some profit that I got. But ultimately, is there an appreciation in my capital? What is my position of various assets that I have got? Have I put my machines and furniture that I have as fixed assets, and all the other assets that I have I put them to appropriate use, and were they able to generate adequate revenues for me? So my ultimate goal at the end of the day is to know where do I stand. Yes. So balance sheet basically serves as a cornerstone where it will tell the company as to what is their status on a particular day after they have done all their transactions throughout the year. And for a student, knowing that what are the elements which are there in the balance sheet, how do you identify what is an asset, and how do you identify and classify what are the liabilities, that becomes very essential as a part of learning the entire balance sheet.
Yes, that's a great approach really. A balance sheet provides a snapshot of financial stability, as sir said, and understanding the accounting equation in balance sheet simplifies its interpretation. Thank you. And the next segment is about addressing challenges faced by the students. Now my question to Professor Patrick. Sir, as a student, madam said we always worried about how to make the adjustment. If problem in exam, if we get the problem with adjustment entries, we always feel some difficult. So adjustment in final accounts often confuse students. Why do you think they struggle, and what strategies can they adopt to solve this?
I go with Nazia ma'am. I think when we were students too, outside the exam hall, the buzzers always did it tally.
Yes.
We are talking about the 30 marks question and neglect the 70 marks is the remaining part. So we used to take great pride and said we tally. Today we have a software with that name as well, tally. I would tell to students there, I've seen this like as teachers also, we go about teaching them, like when you see something falling below the trial balance, we call it as an adjustment. And we say it has got a two-pronged kind of a thing. One effect, it could be there in the trading and P&L or trading or P&L. Another effect is seen in the balance sheet. So if students go about it approaching it very logically, you understand the rational and you understand why the treatment is done that way. Rather than mugging it, I think you have to do it with the rote learning. You have to practice a lot of numericals. Let's say a few of the adjustments which sound very confusing to students is one is closing stock. Now, if closing stock is given outside the trial balance, then it has got a two-sided effect. We take it in the trading account along with sales, and we also go about it treating it as a current asset. As Mama said, right way of classifying the assets and the liabilities. But when closing stock is given inside the trial balance, we show it only once on the balance sheet and we don't show it in the trading account. What is the reason? What is the rationale that is there? The rationale is the adjustment is already done when it is shown inside the trial balance.
Yes.
Another thing students normally get confused is to do with the provisions for debtors, doubtful debts, bad debts,
expenses.
and they get confused what is to be done when there is an old balance, new provision. I mean, there is the same thing which says provision for bad and doubtful debts or discount on debtors given inside the trial balance and it's given outside the trial balance. So how do you make a fresh adjustment? So if you can go about it, I mean, it's not an exhaustive kind of a thing there, but few adjustments. Sometimes it sounds very confusing. If I look for a sole proprietor, it's something to do with interest on capital or interest on drawings. Interest on capital is a return to the business or a revenue to the business there. And interest on drawings is I put it the other way around. Interest on capital is the revenue to the owner of the business there or the stakeholder, the proprietor. And interest on drawing is an income. If the owner had to borrow from somewhere, he had to pay interest and he has to in turn pay it to the business there. Some adjustments, if they are taken care of, whether it is prepaid, whether it is outstanding, what do you do and how do you go about it taking it there? I think a logical way of approaching and trying to address one numerical at a time. And another thing that I have noticed is if it were to be the American or the Canadian kind of an accounting there, or I've seen it even in some good standard textbook like S.N. Maheshwari and others, what they do is they talk about trial balance, they say adjustments, then they say adjusted trial balance, then it becomes a lot easier for you to go about it working the trading P&L balance sheet because you already know the treatment for the adjustment that is done. But without that adjusted trial balance, when we approach one at a time. Another thing that I would have done as a student if I were to start afresh studying for my degree or something today, when I look at a question paper, what I do normally do, they say it's not good to write on the question paper. But the thing is, what I go about with doing is, if I would see terms that are there, I would classify there itself, whether it goes into the trading account, it goes into the P&L account or the balance sheet. And I mean, a typical way of trying to put the pro formas and whatever the figures are, trying to go about with putting it. To start with, it's okay. Maybe you're not every time sure what could be the size of the pro forma or how many items could be given in the final accounts there. But you'll have to find a way and first doing some solved problems, looking at the answers, then going for the unsolved ones. And maybe if you're not able to tally it, go back again and check whether you put the things on the right side or the wrong side there. And then trying to question yourself and the logic starts building. And when you start with small numericals and the confidence that grows in you, that will help you out in taking your exam in a very easy way.
Thank you, sir. Really, just now I went to my examination hall and I thought some question paper is in my hand and I'm writing and I'm making entries on, listing entries on question paper. And very well said, sir. First start with the trial balance, then go with the adjustments and then go with the practical approach of final accounts. Thank you for those practical strategies. Really, students, a structured approach for adjustments can help you to gain clarity and confidence in this area. Now my questions to Nazia. Tallying the balance sheet is another area where students face difficulties.
True.
So what practical tips can help them overcome this hurdle?
Sure, ma'am. As I said, see, we are discussing the topic on final accounts. So this is final, which means what? There should have been something basic there. So what happens is when you understand your basics in terms of what are accounting concepts, what are accounting equations, your entire conventions when you understand, and the rules of accounting, if you know those very clearly, then it is just nothing but sorting the data, sorting it out and understanding which which transaction to put under which head, which transaction to go in which account. So basically, if you are okay and very well versed with your basics related to accounting concepts and accounting rules, identifying what kind of an account it is, whether it is a real account, nominal account or a personal account, knowing those rules, when to debit what and what to be credited, if those items you understand, and then sort it. That is the first step of knowing that your balance sheet is going to be tallied. Second thing is double check. Identify whether every entry has got two impacts, as we always tell our students also. Every transaction has two effects. So checking back whether both the effects are recorded in the books of accounts is second way of doing that. And as a student, even if the balance sheet doesn't tally, we should never panic. It is all about going back and understanding whether we have understood the nature of the transaction. Did we categorize revenue as revenue only and then recorded it? Did we categorize it as an expense and an income, and did we record it at the appropriate places? Because if all the items are recorded at the appropriate places through sorting and classifying, then naturally your balance sheet is going to tally. So double checking, knowing your basics, sorting the items based on revenue, capital and the nature of accounts, knowing the rules of accounts. Ultimately, all that is basic, which leads you to preparation of final accounts. That's how the word final comes into picture in case of final accounts there.
Very clear explanation, ma'am. Really, precision and a step-by-step approach can make a significant difference in ensuring the financial statements are error-free. Then now, sir, my question, sir. How can educators make the topic of final accounts more engaging and accessible for students?
I have seen people, as she said that word, they get panicky kind of a thing there when they look for accounts, tallying and other things. What happens is, when it comes to a course like BCom, we have people coming from different streams. For me, I came from a science background. There could be others from maths background there. So you got to make them very comfortable, and ma'am has rightly put it. Like if you tell them the finer nuances of how to go about with working out, for somebody who's approaching accounts for the very first time, words like debit and credit would sound like Greek and Latin. So don't go about with creating that fear psychosis. Let them like the subject and get them step by step. You would get confused with small things like, let's say there is this concept called the thing where you talk about the separate entity concept. Sometimes you get confused. It's the owner's money, and why does he have to go about with treating his money separately and the business money separately there? So that step-by-step way of understanding the various concepts, various conventions. So it's not like you treat the entire thing in isolation. Let's say if you have to teach them why you have to create a provision for bad and doubtful debts, I need to relate it with the convention of conservatism, where we say that we anticipate losses and make good for it. We don't anticipate profits in advance. If profits come, well and good, but we got to be prepared for the losses, and that is the reason we are creating a provision. It is a charge against the profit that we are doing. We are trying to show it as an expense there. So we got to go about with relating those principles. See, any subject is built on certain concepts and conventions or rules or principles, and accounting is no different. So it is built on this principles that are there, and if people are able to understand and gel well with those concepts there, it becomes a lot easier to get into. It's not a hurried way that you do a few numericals on a journal, ledger, trial balance, teach them what is rectification of errors and show them pro formas. Most often I've seen people getting to that rote method wherein you put an empty pro forma and you say you just fill it, or mug the pro forma, reproduce the pro forma. Rather, I would emphasize on understanding what goes into a trading account, what goes into a P&L account, how do you distinguish, how do you classify, and are you really clear? Like let's say a word like wages and salary and salaries and wages. Now wages are paid to people who are not on permanent roles, so to the contractual employees. And when you use the word wages, we take it in the trading account. When it's given as salaries, we take it in P&L account. But when we say wages and salaries, we take it in trading. And when we say salaries and wages, we take it in P&L account. We must be able to explain as to why it is happening. Only transposing two words, and it is making all the difference in which statement is it coming. And added to it, if there is an adjustment, that could go about with making an error, and the mistake that you do in the trading account gets carried to the P&L and it gets reflected in the balance sheet. So, you'll have to find out when you tally it also there, what is the difference between both the statements. When you work out a trial balance, we look for what is called as a suspense account. Very much like that, if we can work out why the difference had happened, or we have put an adjustment, or we have done a wrong adjustment, or as ma'am has said, we didn't follow the rules in putting the debit or the credit items properly, that can go about with making the students understand better.
Yes, sir. Understanding the real concepts and basics in accounting may lead to less errors. Thank you for the explanation, sir. Now, madam, do you think manual preparation of final accounts still hold relevance in today's tech-driven world?
Definitely, ma'am. See, on any day, technology is also created by men.
Yes.
So when you talk about all softwares which are available to make your final accounts, companies are using Tally. Some of the companies have got their own ERP softwares which they use for preparation of final accounts. But ultimately, as a student, when you know the basics and when you are proceeding to prepare manually the final accounts, you understand what kind of a pro formas you are following. You understand how to prepare even the schedules, because after the amendment of the Companies Act 2013, we are not following the T format
Yes.
of preparation of final accounts. We go by following the format where we record items one below the other.
Yes.
Instead of one beside the other. So as a student, when I know all these changes which are happening in the laws and the amendments which take place, manual preparation will instill the confidence in the preparer of the accounts that they have understood the transaction very clearly, and they also have understood, the format in which the account has to be prepared. So no doubt you have software packages, ERP packages which are available. Tally is the one of the most popular one which is being used for preparation of final accounts, but manual preparation at a student level is very much necessary. Today we have, apart when we draft our curriculum, we have in final accounts where we take the students to the lab and ask them to prepare ledgers and open the accounts using Tally. But at the same time, we make our students draw the pro forma in their respective books so that they know that what is the impact of the transaction recording that happens. So manual preparation on any day is essential, and more so, ma'am, see, for the students, when they are knowing which item to put where, that brings more clarity for them when they go into the higher studies of second year, final year, or maybe PG studies when they go. So that way, manual preparation, I would always say that how much ever technology would grow or how many ever softwares would come, a pen and a pencil and a book would always be the best friends for the students. So manual preparation would always have a different impact when compared to the softwares which we use.
Ma'am, in teaching, how students are taking it, madam, manual accounting, and when they are doing problems on using several software, how they are taking it?
Actually, students show more interest when they execute through Tally, because it is like hands-on. And in the classroom, I would suggest to all the teachers who are there to encourage peer-to-peer learning, because when you give a problem to the entire class and then say solve, that has a different impact when you give a set of problems to 3 students and say you solve this set, and give another set to another 3 and then you say you solve, and then they learn through each other instead of the teacher standing in the front and then narrating things. It is peer-to-peer learning which should be actually encouraged in the class, especially with subjects such as final accounts.
Thank you, ma'am. As we understood that a strong conceptual foundation remains very critical, as it enables professionals, students to interpret and verify different automated outputs effectively. Thank you. And now my questions to Professor Patrick, sir. How has technology, especially accounting softwares, simplified the preparation of final accounts?
I would first appreciate what ma'am has said, that manual on any day is good, but there is a drudgery. If there is a small business, probably a sole proprietor, and you would like to figure out at the end of the year, there are very few transactions. But let's imagine the pace at which people are doing transactions with some of these e-commerce platforms like Amazon or Snapdeal or Jabong or whatever that's there. I mean, you can't imagine in a minute how many transactions are done.
Yes.
So when you are trying to record them manually, I don't think it would be feasible. It is beyond anyone's imagination. So thinking about writing journal entries and then doing the ledgers and then the rectifications and reconciliations and other things, that it doesn't go well. And what the softwares have done it, you are able to say, as ma'am has said, that you are able to create the ledgers there. So the moment you make an entry, it has an impact on the trial balance. See, the thing is, earlier we used to do the final accounts on a quarterly basis, half yearly basis, or an annual basis. But today, with a click of the mouse, I think you have a day-to-day update.
Yes.
Where do you stand with your profitability, with your balance sheet and other things. And businesses are getting more and more complex, more and more complicated. And technology is there to aid it. But we have to remember that technologies are slave and not a masters. So we must be careful on not letting the technology rule over us. And for that reason, we insist that the students go about with learning manually. And then when they take on to the technology, they try to know as to what is happening inside the system, how the program is written and how it has been executed. So when there is any kind of errors, they're able to rectify. And sometimes, if it's not working, then they say that it's system error. Yes. Probably we are giving the commands and blaming the system there. That kind of a thing can be avoided. There are plenty of softwares, and I think the field of accounting will undergo a revolutionary change with technology like blockchain and other things coming, where we'll have cloud-based ledgers that are there. And you don't have any scope for manipulation or trying to go about whether trying to cheat or resort to any unethical means there. So they can't be amended. So it just remains that way. And today I find people like, you do it an account, you're able to scribble it, erase it, find different ways of trying to rectify and other things. That will not be there with technology.
Yes.
So it will be a single thing, and it requires a lot of people to comply with you if you want to really manipulate. So technology is there to aid, and the pace at which the businesses are becoming more and more global, I think we have to tap in to the benefits that the technology is giving and making this monotonous routine tasks that are there. Maybe in future we may not have an accountant, we may not have a clerk, we won't have somebody to handle a petty cash book or other things there. So those kind of things would be done away, and we would have higher end thinking which would come in. And today it's all about AI, and we're not sure as to what is in store for us in future with the field of accounting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. True, sir. Automation in accounting is indeed reduces the workload and errors also, and it also allows professionals to focus on more financial analysis and other aspects. But manual calculation and learning manual concepts are also very important. Then now my question to sir only again. How can students like their understanding of finance accounts to real world business scenarios?
Now, when I was a student or also as working as faculty there were companies which were giving their AGM reports.
Okay.
So we used to scan through it and figure out, one meeting they give very thick books. Now you visit any company's website, you get to see the AGM reports.
Yeah.
And you find what is taught in the classroom to what is there. There is a huge difference between the various statements. Each figure has got so much of explanation that is given in the AGM reports there. And students must be able to reconcile that, it's like when you do it in the classroom there, you are trying to learn swimming without water. So there's a big difference when you can go about with matching it up with reality. When you look at real world experiences, the kind of balance sheets, it's all cut out. It's like instant coffee, which teach them these adjustments, get through it and get through with the exam. And when we get into the real thing, when they take up professional courses like CA, CMA, CS, they realize that a simple thing like even a BRS, what normally I would teach or ma'am would teach or you would teach in a class, 3 to 4 problems.
Yes.
But I'll tell you, for a small organization, if you have to do a BRS, it takes near about 6 months. It's not comprehensible. How can that happen? You have to check at every bill. You got to tick it off. You have to check the statement and the balances given in the bank there. It's a very Herculean process there. So there is a big gap that is there between theory and practice, and students can get hands-on with the AGM reports or these finance statements that are given. And you have this minute things like the subtext or the supertext, where an explanation is given how the figure has come. And when you get into the details, you are able to relate as to how that figure has come and what is taught in the classroom to what is being practiced in the industry. There's a vast difference that is there. So unless and until the teachers bring that classroom kind of case studies, or students have an kind of an appetite to go about with looking into those things there, I think we are creating people who could get with degrees, but they're not able to relate with the real world business problems.
True, sir. Very true. This is a very valuable suggestion. Means analyzing annual reports and AGM reports, all these can bridge a gap between theory and practice. Now, madam, how can knowledge of final accounts benefit students in careers beyond accounting?
Basically what happens is, as a student of commerce, now the options of pursuing a career are varied. All commerce students don't end up becoming accountants. Yes. They are all entering into diverse fields. So for example, if I am talking about a provision for income tax and then understanding how income tax is accounted for in the books of accounts, then naturally I am showing interest towards the subject of taxation. So what happens there is, I am understanding through accounts the field of taxation. Likewise, when I talk about all the rules which are governing every transaction, and then I understand how the company is set up based on the nature of the company and what kind of rules are there to be followed, then I am talking about the governance practices, and I'm talking about auditing, and I'm talking about checking vouchers and all transactional receipts, where I'm more interested into governance and audit. So that way it is not necessary that all the students who are pursuing commerce are invariably becoming accountants as such. And also these financial statements, when you study as a student of commerce, it has got implications for different areas in the business. For instance, you talk about recording and advertising expenditure, and then you roll back and see how is the marketing department functioning. Yes. Then you look at how salaries are paid, and then you go back to your payrolls and then understand how is the HR department functioning. So you have the possibility of exploring the various business functions through your final accounts. So when I study my final accounts, for example, if I am a company which is into research and development, and then I am spending a lot of money on R&D, then I go back and check what is actually happening as an R&D process, and then I can pursue a career there. So, or when I am entering my say employees are being paid their bonuses or PF and all, then I am invariably getting interested in the HR area. So that way, interpreting the various transactions which are there in the final accounts will help a student to understand all the business functions, and they, depending on their interest, they can pursue whatever are the diverse careers which are available.
Yeah, absolutely. Financial literacy is very essential for all the professionals, not only students but professionals who are serving their careers in HR department, marketing department. Means here students not only just be as in professionals, but they can settle in various careers by learning final accounts. Then the next question is also for you, ma'am.
Sure.
What motivational advice would you give to students who are struggling with final accounts?
See, basically, even if the student might have pursued a commerce course at their intermediate level, maybe CEC, MEC, HEC, but when they are coming to study BCom and they are studying final accounts, first basic thing that they need to know is listen to what is being told in the classes and read what is written in your material, because that will give you a grounding or a foundational understanding of the subject itself. And once you are strong in your foundation, start as much practice as possible, because theory leads you to understand with clarity what are the transactions, and with that particular clarity you practice as much as possible. So in various books that we provide at our own institutions or popular author books that we follow, take those books and practice as many problems or solved problems which are also given. You can just have a look at those and then understand. And today, because you have technology at your aid, there are also online calculators which will help you. For example, if I want to find out raw material consumed, then we basically tell our students in the class opening plus purchases minus closing. Yes. Now that is our basic understanding of what is raw material consumed. But today you have, enter into Google and then say calculate raw material consumed, you automatically get it. Or then you understand, how do I make adjustments related to outstanding wages. Then you go back to your book and then understand the basics, that outstanding wages have to go as an addition to wages, and it is actually a liability when you record the double effect. So that way software is also available to help you with that, but your basic understanding comes from the books and the teachers as such. So that way, for the students to have a grounding knowledge, it is essential that they are clear with their concepts and also have clarity with all the kinds of adjustments which are there related to the final accounts.
Thank you. This is very an inspiring message. As you said, clarity and consistent practice and patience are the key to mastering any subject. Now, sir, what is your motivational message to the students, sir? Those who are struggling with the final accounts?
I would say it is more of a challenge. And people, the moment you put numbers, especially when you're coming from a CEC or other backgrounds, what happens is you suffer with what is called as arithmophobia. It's fear of numbers there. I think you need to overcome that, and you got to approach it step by step, start building confidence. I mean, you don't straight attempt a balance sheet that way there. I mean, if you're getting the gross profit right or you're getting the net profit right, that confidence building will take a long way. As ma'am has rightly said, you go about with checking with the solved problems, then go for the unsolved ones and start building. There are numericals where answers are given and you're able to figure out as to your approach is right, and taking guidance. Today there are a lot of these online sources that are there where you can figure out as to what you're doing is right or wrong. And the best way to learn is by practicing. I mean, you can hear it in the class, maybe you have friends speaking, you have tuitions and whatever thing that you have, but ultimately if you don't practice, you don't put effort there, I think there can't be any learning that can happen, and you would have some pleasant surprises happening in the exam hall if you have not thoroughly utilized whatever resources that were there at your disposal.
Yes, thank you, sir. It is a very inspiring message indeed. Sir, nowadays we are in modern AI era. There are so many technological advancements are going on. So how this AI is going to help in our accounting, sir, for students?
I would tell one thing is AI is not going to replace a human being, but a person who doesn't know AI will certainly get replaced. Now, this is what is often quoted in most of the AI platforms. We want it or not, the future is going to be with machine learning, data analytics, and AI. Every subject is going to get influenced by that, and accounting is not going to be any alien to it. Accounting will get influenced. Maybe fields of finance it will get a little more, and already we see there are chatbots which are giving advices and other things in finance. Accounts also, you don't have to get with the drudgery of clerical things, routine, repetitive activities that can be left to AI. So I think there would be an human intervention. The thinking part of it, the way we reason out, the way we think, the way we are emotional about things, AI is not the same way. Maybe yesterday's news goes about saying the Chinese AI software is done at a very small budget compared with the ones which are there in America and Europe. So the thing is, we would get much more advancements which will come, and it will be a disruptive kind of a creativity that will happen, and it is going to vastly influence the field of accounting. But I would still say that the human replacement will not happen, and we will have to go about with rising to an occasion wherein we go about with mastering what AI can do and get the best out of it, and do away with the things that are very routine and drudgery. We can leave it to the system.
Thank you, sir. And how Indian accounting system, how you differentiate Indian accounting system with other countries' accounting systems, sir?
Now, if it comes to the way of belief and other things there, I think students could check for themselves. If it is to do with the things that happen in New Zealand or some of the countries which are there in Sweden, Norway, people trust a lot about those. But here, when it comes for manipulations and other things, I mean, I don't think I've come across a newspaper on any given day where there are no scams and scandals, and it all relates again with accounts.
Yes.
And you have these AG offices that are there which go about it putting a lot of effort in trying to figure out and unearth how the scam had happened there.
Yes.
And the trust part of it is to be built, and they are bodies which are there, they make laws, they go about telling like these are the things, these are the vouchers, these are the documents that must go about with standing according or in accordance with the accounts to defend them. But still there is something which is going wrong, and I would say any country that you do accounts is generic, it's not specific to a country.
Yes.
It's the same rules that we follow. Maybe the American way is different from the rest of the world, where they depend more on the accounting equation rather than trying to work out with the journals, rules and other things there. But the thing is, at the end of the day, across the globe, you talk about the same words of solvency, liquidity, profitability. You talk about the balance sheet, and you're trying to do the interpretations, be it the trend analysis, common size, comparative, ratio analysis. The laws of interpretation are the same, and interpretations depend upon the final accounts there.
Yes.
So across the globe, I don't think, probably the approach is different. Let's say that we are writing liability and capital on the left side and assets on the right side. If I look at the Canadian and American, it is the reverse. They write the assets on the left and liabilities and capital on the right.
Okay.
I mean, it's for the sake of uniqueness or something of that kind, but accounts is the same everywhere, as I would tell.
Thank
in
you.
addition to that also, because as sir said, though different countries of the world are practicing in a different way, but ultimate goal is the same thing, and that's how the transition of having to have IFRS, that is how we are coming at a convergence where all accounting standards have to be similar and reporting standards also have to be similar. So that's how at the end of maybe down the line, I would say that all the countries of the world would eventually go to follow common standards or common reporting practices which are there. So the kind of differences would be there would probably be ruled out in future as such.
Thank you for giving the knowledge of Indian and foreign, how it is in foreign. Now, madam, my question as what is the role of auditor, as we called auditor as an watchdog of the business. So how these accounting tools and various techniques is helping auditor to minimize those errors and get transparency in accounting?
Basically, as an auditor, when you talk about how you are helping to understand authenticity of the accounts and the records which are there, you begin with again to the basics of checking, because when an accountant has recorded a transaction, is he having a documentary or any other evidence supporting that particular transaction? So that becomes the first step in the process of audit, whereby I call back upon all the documentary evidences and check whether what the documentary evidence is there and what I have recorded is same or not. So that would be the first level. The second level would be if there is any discrepancy, then has the discrepancy arisen because you might have changed an accounting policy, which could again roll back to your accounting standards. So what kind of accounting standards has the company followed, be it in terms of recording your inventory, or if you have made any changes in the accounting policies, then what kind of a standard did you follow? So auditor will have to roll back and understand what standard accountant followed in order to record that particular transaction, in case there had been any discrepancy as such. And then ultimately you talk about the red tick marks which auditors usually give to the manual book of account, and then they check back. That is how we are also talking about preventing frauds in the system of accounting. And today the process of audit has enhanced to a level that we are today talking about forensic accounting.
Yes.
So, and fraud detection at the very basic level, where you don't take it at the end and say that my god, so much of fraud has happened, but at the entry level itself, when the transaction has come to the recording step itself, there the auditor starts his duty at that level only, and then you start checking by rolling back to your transaction and the accounting standard and the documentary evidence which are there. So the role of an auditor here is not when role of accountant ends. The role of an auditor begins simultaneously as an accountant has started to enter the transaction as such.
Thank you, very good inputs, ma'am. The next one is, ma'am, as a teachers, we across with many students, and some of the students, they come with their recommendation letters for foreign jobs, and those who have completed BCom from our country, they have very ample opportunities in foreign. And I recently come across with some Afghanian students and some other foreign students. They are coming here in our country, particularly pursuing BCom. How you can say this, why our Indian accounting system or our professional bodies have that much impact on other foreign students also and careers also?
Yes, of course. Ma'am, if you see any field of education, you see not only accountancy, but talk about Indian medical education, talk about Indian engineering education, or talk about Indian education related to commerce, business, finance, accounts and all. We have Indians who are spread across the globe. So the education system itself is so strong that we instill that foundational theoretical knowledge in the students, that is what attracts the foreign students to the country. Though that country, for example, as you said, Afghanistan, though they might be following some other practices related to recording accounts, but those students are learning Indian practices.
Yes.
And then when they go back, they see whether there is a possibility of them applying the same standards that they have learned here in their respective countries as such. And then you also have to understand, you know, in international accounting, when you say, you always have a choice of law.
Yes.
So which law do you follow or which standard do you follow, it is up to the firm which is operating. So all these foreign students are attracted towards Indian education and more so learning Indian system of accounting thanks to bodies like Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Indian Chartered Accountant Institute of India. They have all given us such strong foundational basics related to accountancy that the system has become so very strong in the country, ma'am.
Yeah. And even to do with letters of recommendation that we give to our own students working abroad, naturally, because those students have expressed their expertise in the subject, so that's how we end up recommending them to the other countries also.
Thank you, ma'am. Very good explanation by you with regard to the how the careers in foreign in accounting, particularly in accounting area is. Finally, sir, for both of you, my question, can you each of you share one practical tip for students who wants to excel in final accounts?
I would say that have a fine grounding in the basics. If your basics are strong, you can build a Manhattan.
Yes.
Very strong building can come over. If the basics are weak, the building will collapse. Final accounts comes at the last stage where the building is.
Yes.
So you'll have to bank upon the way you have a fine grasp, understanding and grounding of the basics. If that is done well, and you got to be curious, asking questions as to why is it that way, why is it this way, why are you calling it capital, why is it revenue. Now sometimes I get confused, when you talk about revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. I mean, does it not sound like an oxymoron when you use the word revenue expenditure?
Yes.
How do these two words go together?
Yes.
So as students, I tell you at every step, don't just take it the way it is being taught. Be curious, ask questions and keep building over that. And the basics are strong, I think the final output ought to be stronger.
Thank you, madam. From your side?
I would suggest that, apart from, no doubt basics have to be strong. Apart from doing your manual thing, also learn all the available softwares which are there, because now most of the softwares are all there ready for free trial versions.
Yes.
So you can just download the trial versions, learn the software and also link it back to what you have learned in your classrooms as such.
Very well explained, madam. Manual with technical.
Yes.
Thank you, professors. We have to end here for your valuable insight. As we have discussed today, final accounts are more than not just final statements. They are the backbone of financial decision making. I hope our viewers leave this session with greater clarity and motivation to excel in their fundamental subjects. Thank you all for participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.